I'm here to apologize for the legacy my generation is leaving you. You're inheriting a Christian culture that has been satisfied with this Grand Canyon kind of divide between local churches and the neighborhoods that surround their communities. We've tried to bridge that gap. My generation has tried, but we've failed. I've lived and worked in poor communities all my life. I was a senior pastor, I was an executive pastor, I was an associate pastor, and a few years ago I left the pastorate and became a community organizer. I was a community organizer in the poorest community in San Diego. High poverty, high crime, every social problem that you could imagine existed in that community. At any one time, the bright spot was that we had 40 different cultural groups and 40 different languages spoken every day. On a regular day, I would spend time with local residents. I was talking to politicians, physicians, nonprofit executives, nurses, educators, and the people that were absent from the conversation about what was going on in the church, in the community, was the church. It was really interesting. You couldn't hear the voice of the church in the community, a major conflict. And it was fascinating to hear what the community professionals and the residents would say. They'd say things like, "Don't they care about us? Those people drive in on Sunday and they drive out and they don't care about the community." Some people would get kind of tainted and they'd say, "Well, I think it's all about business. It's about money and it's about numbers of people in their church." Every once in a while, a pastor would show up at a meeting and he'd stay once and leave. So I went to the churches, and I began to talk to them about this, and I said, "Hey, this is what's going on in the community. Would you come and help us?" And I'll never forget one pastor, he said, "I'm going to pray for you, brother, but that's not our ministry. We're not going to do anything about that." I talked to another guy, and he said, "John, this is what I have lived for. I've been waiting my whole life to work in a community like this. This is what I believe God led me into the ministry, and I spend all of my time in church meetings, in Christian culture, in committee meetings, and I never get out into the community. How do I do that?" See, that's the dilemma that we face. On one hand, we have a local church that has educated leadership, they have a value of service, they have facilities, they have money, they have a communication system, they have these great talents, and yet in the community, you have high poverty, high crime, anger, despair, and how do we bridge those? I kept thinking about that question. How do I get people in the pews out into the community to serve? So I talked to a friend of mine. He's a prominent pastor in San Diego. We had lunch one day, and I said, "I'm just wrestling with this question. I just can't get this out of my head. I want to get these people outside of the church into the community." And he goes, John, that's the wrong question. You need to be talking about getting the people in the community into the pews." See, he was representing the existing church culture, and I was trying to get the church culture out into the community. I respected him, but I couldn't get this out of my head, so I began researching all over the country different examples of how churches were reaching out to the community and what were they doing, and I was calling people. I was working with a researcher at San Diego State. We began to gather models and created a model of community development. We taught a bunch of pastors, but more than anything, we began to understand that to bridge that gap, there were some key lessons that we were learning. So let me tell you what we learned. 3 things: to listen, to look, and to lead. What would happen if churches began to listen to their community? We are known by the people in the community as talkers. We train our pastors to be good talkers. We train our people to be good talkers. We don't train them to be good listeners. I worked with a really rich church in a prominent part of San Diego, and these folks said, "We want to reach out to our community." They began to go out and listen, and time after time, they kept coming in and saying, "We have to do something with seniors and something with youth." They kept praying, they kept listening, and finally, they reached out, they got the seniors mobilized in the school, they built a partnership that helped thousands of kids because they listened. They listened. And then to look inside. See, I would suggest to you that the churches are the greatest repository of social capital and resources in any community in the nation. Churches are in every community. And if we can take that incredible talent and turn it outward, one pastor was aware of the homeless community around his church. And he looked inside and he said, wait a minute, I've got a bunch of people that love to cook. And so on Tuesday night, they had Pete's Cafe. It wasn't dinner for the homeless, it was dinner with the homeless. And they got to know one another, they began to build relationships, and over time, the homelessness went away. The people began to get jobs and get the help that they needed. And then to lead. There was a shooting in southeast San Diego. It was a gang battle that took place, and a couple of ladies coming out of church walking into a market were killed. One of the pastors that we had been working with jumped on this issue and said, wait a minute, I've got to do something. And he began to mobilize local gang leaders, OGs, the original gangsters. And he said, hey, how do we solve this problem? And the church, working with the community, began to show leadership in a unique way. You see, our church culture, regardless of how cool or hip or relevant or relaxed that we are, at the end of the day, we've forgotten the important lesson that we've learned in foreign missions. And in foreign missions, we learned you go into a community, you study the culture, you listen, you learn the language, the customs, the manners that are going on in the people, and slowly you begin to infuse the truth. Today, we expect visitors, people from the outside, to adapt to our culture, and we've successfully changed the Great Commission from go into all the world to come and see us at 8 o'clock, 9:30, and 11 on Sunday. So I pray you will accept my apology, and you'll take this thinking and go a little bit further. Live your lives like revolutionaries, like people that are committed to changing the world, because you have a world to win. Bless you.
Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Visit biola.edu to find out how Biola could make a difference in your life.